Hello all and welcome to a new Sales EU show. Today, I have our own John Golden on my side as co-host. Hi John, how are you
Hi,
doing?
hi Martha. Good to see you.
Thanks for being here. And of course our special guest today is Troy Burk, CEO of Right On Interactive. Hi Troy, I hope you are fine. It's a pleasure having you on air today. Troy, tell us a little bit about you, and then we will jump into the questions.
Sure, you bet. Yeah, so I'm the co-founder of Right On Interactive. Been around for the technology space for probably 20 years, and helping companies over the years do a better job of leveraging technology, finding better ways to engage with their customers, and really improve processes. So always have been sort of the left brain marketer. So how can you use data, insight, information to help drive more efficiencies and effectiveness?
Well, great. We're going to talk today, I think, about lifecycle marketing. And, most salespeople have grown up in kind of a linear process. Marketing generate leads, kick them over the wall, sales run with them. Lifecycle marketing is a bit different. So what are some of the problems that you think sales are facing with the concept of lifecycle marketing?
Yeah, it's a good question, John. I think the first piece of that is what is lifecycle marketing, and so I think sales understanding what the term means and how it relates to them. Gone through a trend where the buyers now have control of the process. Marketing is playing a very different role with sales. What worked maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago probably doesn't work now. And then I guess it's around how do you take lifecycle marketing and help bring all this together. So the first, I guess, would be the definition of lifecycle marketing. And when we think about that, it's how companies and individuals move through a relationship with a brand, from awareness all the way through abundance. So it's a higher level view of where are every single prospect and customer, where are they in the relationship with my company. The second thing is that sales is changing. I saw a stat a few years ago that talked about 50% of salespeople don't hit quota. The ramp time to get a salesperson up to speed is now, greater than 7 months. And then the buyers now have control, and I think, John, you had mentioned this, that marketing in the past, perhaps it was 10% marketing, 9%, 90% sales. Now we're seeing, in a lot of cases, it's 80% marketing and then 20% sales. So there's a lot of shifting going on, and that's because there's a explosion of data, there's access to information, it's the buyers taking control of the process, so it sort of has changed the game with it.
Yeah, so obviously it's a much more expansive and integrated process, like you said, and marketing are playing a much greater role than ever. So how can lifecycle marketing, how can it really help sales reps and their sales managers? How can it help them get out of the wish and hope opportunity pipeline into some more of a predictable rhythm?
Right? So let's give the sales team access to the information they need. So customers are now interacting and engaging with companies through a whole host of different channels. And it's no longer just the sales team, it's also the website, it's also social media channels, it's different events, there's a ton of different touch points, and sales needs to have that visibility. So it's not just here's who I called, here's who I met with, but what else is going on. The second thing is that you think about a sales team, and traditionally they would go through and put together a forecast, right? Here's my prospects that are in the different various sales stages, and I'm going to predict that they're going to X% at this point in time. As opposed to theory, and you can start looking at your sales reps based on directly. How long is the duration typically for a customer to move to the next stage based on different engagement, based on different types of content that they engage with, so it can become a lot more predictable and becomes easier for a company to predict future revenue as opposed to just listening to what the sales team says and says, hey, I've got these guys in there, they're going to close, I'm going to commit to it, and then they never do.
So it's a more expansive view of the customer journey, I guess, is what you're outlining.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, a good example is I had a sales rep a few months ago, and we have something that we use here is called E2C, right? It's the engagement to conversion ratio. And so we sell to companies, so we're B2B. And typically for a customer to come on board with Right On Interactive, our average E2C score is 220 engagement points. So we look across all forms of engagement, it's social engagement. Until they get to that threshold, they normally don't convert. Sales rep came to me and said, Troy, this deal's going to close. I've had one meeting with them, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, yeah, they've got I'm like, it's not going to happen. And they're like, well, no, it's going to happen. This is a great, great contact in the company. They really like us. They told me it's going to close really quickly, and they've had forecasted this thing to close by, within 2 weeks. It didn't happen. They had 4 more meetings. They got to 220 engagement points, and they closed. So it's taking that down to a salesperson level or an entire company level. What does the data tell you? How is it working? It can become a lot more scientific than just the salesperson sort of hoping and wishing and telling you that the deal's going to close because they have a great relationship.
Yeah, well, that's obviously a much different, as you say, that's a big shift, because normally it's trust what the salesperson says, but now you're saying that if you look across a lot of different data points and take a composite view of it, you're going to get much more predictable results. But let me ask you about, okay, so I get the concept and how it can work, but where I always find most things to do with sales, there is always one major point of failure, and that is sales leadership. Like it's whatever sales leadership really put their weight behind happens, and what they don't buy into doesn't happen. And any initiative with the salesperson is going to live or die by how much engagement you get by sales leadership. So when it comes to marketing, especially in the era we're in now, how should sales leadership be involved in marketing strategy?
I think they have to be involved hand in hand. I mean, we hear the buzzword sales and marketing alignment, and I ask companies, what's that mean? And they say, well, we got together with marketing in terms of what a marketing qualified lead is. And so then when we pass a lead over the wall to the sales team, they sort of have the same idea on expectations. And I'm like, but your analogy actually has a wall in it, right?
Yeah.
So how do you have alignment when you're just talking about passing leads over? I think it starts at the strategic level where sales and marketing need to be together. Are you putting together a business plan? They're like, yeah, I got one for the year, I have one for the quarter, it's one page, it has my high-level strategies and goals and my tactics in there. I'm like, is marketing helping you put that together? No, they're not. Okay. So it's like this big disconnect. We all use buzzwords that sales and marketing alignment, but the teams really aren't aligned at the front end on the strategy on how you're going to address it. If you take a company that sells an enterprise solution, they have outside sales reps that are in a territory. They're going to have marked accounts that they want to go after. How is marketing helping them with those accounts, right? So what really needs to be put in place throughout every touch point that sales rep is having with that prospect, opposed to just simply looking at, I'm going to focus on inbound leads that may or may not be anywhere close to this target list that you have that you should be. It starts at the high level from a strategy standpoint, with sales and marketing both being at the table and putting that plan together, and then thinking through how can we work in tandem to drive the best results. A great thing, question I always ask VPs of sales. So I'm meeting with the company, I sit down with the VP of sales, and I say, and suppose, John, you're the VP of sales, right? And I say, hey, John, tell me what your KPI is. And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, Troy, it's really pretty simple. It's quota attainment, right? I've got to hit this number, right? right? And quota number. Maybe it's annual, maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's monthly. And then I say, okay, that's great. Well, that's a lag measure, right? You can't change the scoreboard by throwing a rock at it, right? So what are you doing? What are you doing? Typically tell me, well, we measure activity. And I got this great process down, Troy. I know how many phone calls. Okay, so basically your goal is to hit quota, and what you're doing daily, the plays that you're putting on the field is that you're tracking daily activity with your sales reps. Yep, absolutely. Well, how's it going? Well, half my sales team, they're not hitting quota, right? We're behind where we need to be. And then I say, okay, activity. Your hypothesis would be the sales rep that has the most activity is your number one sales rep. Is that true? And then they look at me and they say, no, that's not true. The sales rep with the most activity is not the number one sales rep. So I'm like, then why are you managing your team by that? And they say, well, is there a better way? And I say, yeah, of course there's a better way. And then it shifts to define who your best customer is. Do you really know who your ideal customer is? And often companies don't really know who that is, right? And there's on consumption, PSLs or your sales manager and say, how about you stack rank your sales team members now on activity? Oh yeah, it does change, right? So now I have some people here that have more activity, but they are truly calling on the people that are absolutely in our wheelhouse, and that's where we should focus. They said, is that the answer? I said, nope, that's not the answer. So the next level of this is looking at engagement. This is all about the balls being thrown back. So activity is great, but if no one's actually interacting with you, it's fruitless, right? So if a salesperson has a face-to-face meeting, hey, that's a lot of engagement. Maybe that's 20 or 30 engagement points. If a prospect visits your website and they check out a couple pages, all right, maybe it's a few points. If they attend your webinar for an hour, hey, maybe that's 15, 20 points. So now you look at your sales team members and you say, I'm going to stack rank them based on who has the most engagement against the fit, and that will absolutely, matter-of-factly, tell you who's going to be successful and who's not. So it changes the way that sales managers can think about or rewards the sales reps for focusing on engagement as opposed to just, hey, I made 400 cold calls and left 400 voicemails. Right. You're not going to get anywhere, right? So what can you do to try to engage more people and more human conversations with the sales team?
Yeah, it's one of the things that still amazes me to this day is, as you rightly point out, is how many organizations don't have a good profile of their ideal buyer. I mean, and it seems so fundamental, but as you say, I mean, it's often they haven't really defined them well. And then I like what you're saying because, yeah, a lot of sales organizations will say, you know, when the going gets tough, you know, sales gets busy, right? And they just go more and more activities. And, you know, if you make 50 calls to the wrong profile of customer, and now you make 100 calls to the wrong profile of customer, you're going to suddenly get a different result. But the idea of engagement and looking at different signs of engagement is truly how you can measure whether that prospect actually, you know, is cares about what you're doing. So what about, let's get back to the salesperson. You know, how can they be more efficient and effective using customer lifecycle marketing? So really understanding the concept of engagement and how they can derive that engagement to sort of what you said earlier, getting all those touch points.
Sorry for the interruption, but we have a question from Mick.
Oh, good.
Troy, he would like to know, is there any way we can put marketing on specific targets like sales?
Hey,
Hello?
Martha. Yeah, I didn't get.
Yeah, now. Should I repeat that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, is there any way we can put marketing on specific targets like sales?
Is there any way we can put marketing on specific targets? Is that the question?
Like sales, yeah.
Yeah. So I think what the question is alluding to, Troy, is basically, the way salespeople's answer back will always be, well, that's all very well, but we've got sales targets. How about marketing have sales targets too, or share in some of those targets?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think marketing needs to be held accountable to driving revenue, right? And they need to look at everything that they're doing. It's beyond just activity from a marketing standpoint. Hey, I have a bunch of new friends or followers or likes or visits. Okay, but are you moving people to the next stage? And if you're not truly moving people across the entire organization, and it's not just marketing versus sales, but it's marketing and sales and product and client success, it's the entire organization working in harmony to try to move people to that next level. And if people aren't converting and they're not moving, and if you're not shrinking the time in which people move through this life cycle, you're not winning. So yeah, absolutely. Marketing needs to have hardcore metrics that says you're going to be held accountable to helping us prove that we're going to more efficiently and more effectively work in tandem with the sales team to convert more people faster.
So in essence, what you're saying, and I would totally agree with you, is that, they should really share some common KPIs. Really, they should all be on the same, relatively same plan, if you like. And that way, then maybe you'll get that integration between those groups.
Yeah, I think the lines are blurring. Like, I think we're all in sales and we're all in marketing, right? And then the sales team, they need to be interacting on social media channels. It's no longer marketing's job to do all that. People and close them down. You added consultant. People don't like to be sold, but they like to buy, and they want to buy from. Changing too, John, where they have to be as another, and one does, and one is all over different forums and communities, and they're publishing different information. Is that sales or is that marketing? Right? It's the personal. Marketing can help that salesperson develop that persona. Sales is, I need to help position this salesperson as an expert and someone that can truly help our customers, opposed to just marketing doing all that work and then trying to pass a lead to the sales team.
Yeah, and absolutely. So it really does change it really changes the approach of salespeople, and understanding that selling involves so much more than it did traditionally. And I guess that goes back to the sales manager also understanding and making space for that salesperson to be able to do the things that you're talking about. Because that's always one of the things that I find is it's great to talk about this, but again, back to if the sales manager doesn't create the space and value these kind of activities, it's not going to happen, right?
And it comes back to sales has a role to play here too, right? And they need to give marketing good data and good information. They need to log their activity in pipeline, right? They need to log their activity in their CRM, and whether that's meetings or it's phone calls, because based on that behavior, based on that activity, it's going to help marketing facilitate a whole bunch of automated campaigns and communications. Has a responsibility of making sure that they're updating information, they're putting new records in the system. If you're deploying emails, you got to make sure that you opt people in from a permission standpoint. But you've got to have good data, and that often starts with the sales team. And then often when people implement a CRM, the challenge is the sales team going to actually use it? Well, if marketing can come back and say, hey, you put good data in here, we will run all these campaigns on your behalf. The emails will come from you, the responses will go back to you. You'll have complete visibility of how this person interacts with us on all of our different channels that we have, our website, our social channels, etc. And that will give you the insight. And also, you'll know what type of content is important for that prospect. If that prospect is downloading certain white papers, or they're searching certain terms for their business, to have a better conversation, more relevant for those prospects, that will help convert more customers, become customers, as they are sort of focus on.
Yeah, so it looks like what we're also asking is we're saying that salespeople have to get more efficient, have to get more organized, because now in many ways they have to organize their days maybe differently, because they have to do a wider variety of activities than ever before. So do you have any suggestions on how salespeople can become more efficient or effective, given that they have all these different activities that they need to do now, or different types of engagements that they have to engage in on a daily basis?
Yeah, I do. And as I think about the sales team, at the end of the day, what you really want is, when I walk in the office this morning, I want to have the most productive day I could ever have. Who should I engage with today to help salespeople be a lot more efficient on their daily activities, on who to call, where do you spend your time? I think you'll find success. So just thinking of organize their day, right? So one way they do this is they log into their based on close date. I'm going to start calling these. I'm going to start calling to find out if it's going to close or not. That's one way of doing it. Line and looking at what stage they're in, and say, well, regardless of the actual date that someone's going to close, I'm going to focus on folks that are further in the sales funnel, and I'm going to start working backwards. Okay, that's one way of doing it, but is that the best people to call, right? Maybe it is, maybe. List of people I want to call. Maybe it's certain demographics I want to call on, and I'm going to start plowing through this list. That's one way of doing it, but is that the best people to call, right? And then the other way of doing this is that the salesperson's been busy, right? They have been calling on their territory for some time, and then they schedule future tasks. And they wake up every day and they're going to say, I'm going to go through and I'm going to knock my task out because this is who I need to knock out. And the last one is engagement. But before I talk about engagement, when we interview salespeople at Right On Interactive, I often ask them this question, and I say, I don't know if you're motivated by reward that it is, and suppose I have a stack, I got $1 million. It's not, but this week to go close down a new customer. You got 2 weeks. What do? Do you go through your tasks? Do you look at the opportunities by close date? Do you look at who's in your pipeline? Do you start plowing through a list? I don't know, right? And I say, now, John, suppose you're motivated by fear, right? And I have a big box of those ants that are killer ants in Africa that will devour cows and stuff, right? And if you don't close down the customer, the ants are coming after you. So either way, you've got 2 weeks. Go. What are you going to do? And it's interesting to get the feedback on how folks say that they market and try to figure it out. But wouldn't it be awesome to have this piece here that customer lifecycle marketing can bring you, in addition to what you might be doing from chasing my have engagement against the fit. So show me all the prospects that I haven't talked to that are showing a ton of activity that, man, if I called them, they'd probably take a meeting, I could probably close them. That's how marketing can help the sales team focus on things that can help them actually find success.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I've with sales teams in the past, I've used a lot of different incentives and stuff, but the killer ants is one I haven't used yet, and I definitely going to file that one away for the future. So let's talk metrics, right? Because at the end of the day, sales managers, need to be measuring something, and it's often the case. I mean, I think we're in a bit of a metrics obsessed world these days, and I think we measure too many of the wrong things, where it's like nice to have data points, but they're not that valuable. So what would you say are maybe maybe the top three metrics that a sales manager should look at from a customer lifecycle marketing solution? What do you think they should be looking at?
Well, I think they definitely have to look at what was the first source of engagement, right? I mean, truly understanding, how did that person first interact with the brand, and at a high level, was it sales or was it marketing? And I think that's pretty important to understand. I'm a salesperson. I'm putting people into my CRM. I'm making phone calls. I'm having meetings, and then they go to the website and they have a bunch of activity. All right, marketing helped influence that, but the initial source was the sales team, right? So I think to try to understand, is the first engagement happening from sales or is it happening from marketing? And then maybe even more specifically what those engagement points were. That will help you sort of understand, once people convert to customers, what initial engagements drive in your business. So I think it's important to capture that on the front end, the first engagement source, and at a higher level, sales and marketing. And then it's what I talked about before, right? I think it's looking at the sales team members based on activity, engagement, and I want to look at trends over time. For a salesperson, I know if they're adding and then actually has a pipeline, they can close some business. So activity to qualified opportunities. We call them NNOs, so net new opportunities, but it's a qualified opportunity, however a company would want to define what that is. And the last piece is looking at that E2C various life cycle stages.
Yeah, so those are great metrics, and those are very, very defined and easily understood ones, which I think is important as well. Because, like I said earlier, I mean, I think we should be focused on a couple of metrics and data points, and really make sure that they're the right ones, and then focus our attention on those, and that way everybody can get aligned, rather than getting overwhelmed with lots of data that, frankly is interesting but not essential. But let's move into something maybe a little bit more specific around lifecycle marketing. So there's the concept of the anonymous and the identified visitor. I was reading about this. So first of all, maybe just explain to the audience what those are, and then what are some best practices around reporting on both of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all about capturing that customer or that prospect behavior. So on your website, you're able to track identified visitors, folks that you know, and then you're also able to look at anonymous visitors, which are the companies, but maybe not necessarily the specific person. Sales teams love this, right? Because it's the visibility that shows who's on your website, who's downloading white papers, who's watching the videos, who's checking the pricing page out. So it's that great insight that sales teams love, right? So the best practice with that is, I think you do have to determine what are the rules of engagement, right? So you don't want your sales team calling someone just because they visited your website, right? So you definitely want to try to say there has to be enough indicators before someone should engage. And different companies are, some have small sales teams, and the sales team may engage. Other companies have big organizations, and maybe that lead qualification function is in marketing, right? So maybe they would actually reach out to folks once they get to a certain threshold. But the key is to make sure at what point in time do you actually reach out to somebody. Mm-hmm. The other best practice is if the salesperson is not putting their contacts in the CRM, and then all of a sudden someone comes from the website from this company, that lead might go to somebody else. So they're encouraged to put the data in the CRM, so when that company or that person comes back and they're showing activity, they definitely will be passed, hey, did you know, John, that your prospect, Troy, was on our site yesterday? He visited 14 pages, and somehow he's all about understanding this, one component of our solution. And then that's going to allow you to engage with Troy in a very meaningful way. looking at that content. Visitors are my identified visitors. What are they looking at? What content are they consuming? That just helps in the sales process. And when the sales Did that answer your question, John?
No, absolutely, and I think that's one of the things that again, it goes back to discipline, because as you know, there's a great tendency that when somebody interacts with your website or downloads a white paper, I mean, how many times has it happened to you that you've downloaded a white paper and the phone rings 2 minutes later and it's a salesperson from that company? So now you end up, so what does that do to you? That just teaches you to put in false phone numbers and all that, and which is, which doesn't help anybody. But the idea of being disciplined and, as you say, understanding that, engagement is on the time frame of the buyer, and different engagements mean different things, and maintaining that discipline, because it is, because everybody still wants those hot leads, and some people will jump on any type of engagement and leap straight in, and I think that's a highly decredentialing for an organization, because I always think, when that happens to me, I always think, God, what is that organization thinking? Who is that guy's sales manager, and why are they doing this?
Right. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So, so in terms of, which kind of segues nicely in, Troy, to the next question, is about, how much visibility should a salesperson or a team member have into marketing engagement, or when should they get that visibility? Because there is that, as I said, temptation that if you give them visibility or total visibility, they're just going to leap in the first time they see something that they think is engagement.
Yeah, and I think that it may be unique for every company, right? And it's probably based on how many leads or visitors. Is it 10 a day, or 100 a day, or is it 10,000 a day? And so, based on sort of how that company thresholds of how much information you would share with them. I always come from the school of thought of, transparency is great, and I think that the showing, hey, here's how everyone's interacting, because the sales team, they're out there doing activities, they're attending networking events, they're getting referrals from their influencers, they're doing a whole host of things. They need to see that activity if it's having an impact on the back end. So I'm a fan of showing everything that marketing is doing of engagement, when you should actually call or not. So I would say show more, but have systems and processes in place to make sure that
Yeah, so a lot of it seems to come back to educating the salespeople around the concept of lifecycle marketing, or the concept of engagement by customers. So really educating them and making sure that they understand and are disciplined around, how they leverage this information. So I think a lot of it obviously comes back to continuing to educate the salespeople on the changing habits of buyers.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think if you look at how things have changed in years past, they're going to pass them to the sales team, and then we pass them off to client success, and we don't really see them again per se. And it's just to repeat that process, right? Generate more leads. Sales actually tries to close them down, and we pass them off as a customer. And what's changed now is that we're actually going in the reverse direction, right? So customer lifecycle marketing starts with your best customers, and what you want those customers to do is to buy only from you or increase that share of wallet, but you want them to amplify your brand. And if you have your best customers talking about you and promoting you, it's going to drive more leads. I saw this stat the other day that said say great things about your company. That's your job. You're going to say great things about your company. I'm not yet sure I believe it yet, though. But the number one source where I go, you know where this is, John? What's the number one source people go to make decisions on buying products or services? What's the number one source?
Well, it's third-party sites, or they go to people they know.
You got it. Yeah, they look at their peers, right? So they go and say,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to trust what my peers or my friends are saying. That's where I'm going to buy. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, okay, so you're doing this marketing and you're trying to convince everyone and push them through this funnel. Your brand, it's going to do wonders for your business. So how do you start with that customer, that profile, get those customers happy, find new ways to get them to say positive through review sites or just tell their friends?
Mm-hmm.
Most of those conversations that you're having, the brand doesn't control, right? I say, hey, John, I'm looking for a new attorney. Who do you recommend? John says, hey, I use XYZ,
Yeah.
or hey, I'm looking for a new technology. Those conversations are taking place. The brand cannot control that conversation. So not everyone's in a campaign. But what they can control is, let's provide a great customer experience. Let's make sure that we're setting the right expectations. Let's make sure that we're engaging truly product. It's everyone coming together saying, technologies and new startups are changing the way the industry. Hey, push a button, right, and something happens, right? I mean, it
Right.
changes an entire industry. So companies need to innovate. They need to think through their customers. How can we get our customers to help us think about what they really need, and we can innovate. And marketing is going to drive more leads and pass them to the sales team.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. I mean, I think that's a really interesting. Sorry, Martha, you wanted to say something?
Yes, we have a question from
Okay.
Greg. He asked, do you think that sales and marketing have an issue understanding what assists in moving a client forward in CLM? Should I repeat?
Do sales and marketing have customer lifecycle marketing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, unless they have that visibility there, right? Unless they have the tools and the process in place, then yeah, I think it's going to be hard for them to. Otherwise, they just don't know, right? Everyone's busy, but are they really productive? And that's the question. How do you become a lot more productive? And it starts with business.
I think we lost Troy.
Yeah, I think we did. But I tell you, I think some interesting points to pick up on there. One of them was this idea of people nowadays make a lot of their buying decisions based on what their peers do, right? So the days of sort of selling to somebody, having them as a customer, and then they move on. I mean, those days are gone, because you really have to look at, okay, how am I going to make sure that this customer has the best experience possible, so that they are going to refer me into their network. They're going to provide those referrals for me that I don't even know about. The ones where somebody contacts them through LinkedIn and says, "I see it appears, what marketing system are you using? Because I respect you," and then you give me feedback. All those things that are going on in the background. Troy, I was just saying how absolutely agree that you have to look at the customer experience, and no longer can you have this idea of selling to someone and kind of throwing it over to implementation, and as long as I don't hear anything from that customer, then everything is good and I can just move on and find new people. I need to be actively ensuring that that customer has the best experience possible, because I don't know who they're talking to.
Exactly.
And then looking at, let's talk a little bit more about the impact. You mentioned that statistic earlier about customers being 50% through their buying process. or seen it at 65%, I've seen it at 75%. And for me, it doesn't really matter what the statistic is. I think it is a given that customers generally are doing more research and are doing more self-discovery and are more self-sufficient than they ever were before, and that may differ for different industries or whatever. But what it does do is it changes the game a little bit for salespeople. So in your estimation, what does that change for a salesperson? The fact that there is so much more of the buying process that's done absent their engagement, their involvement.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does a few things. One, I think it amplifies them. The research on the front end, what information, what messaging, what tools, what resources do we need to truly have to allow us to be competitive in the marketplace? So if people are doing that research and the salesperson is not in control of it, then marketing needs to be buttoned up with making sure that they have the right resources and information, that when people are researching, they are getting the information to help them make decisions, and hopefully that company is going to be considered before it gets passed off and the salesperson is sort of notified. So sales needs to work with marketing to make sure that, hey, you know, these are the things that I need to have. If they're not going to talk to me, but they want to find this information, let me help put together some of that information that we need, whether that's case studies, maybe it's use cases of how customers are actually finding value of their product or service. Maybe it's a salesperson playing a role in helping amplify that message via social media and other channels. So it just changes, right? So it's no longer the whole 10% pass me a lead. Mm-hmm. And they're only going to talk to you, being maybe in some companies a transactional salesperson, to being a lot more of a consultative salesperson that can truly help that company understand the value of why working with your company is more valuable than working somewhere else.
And it does, and I think it does raise an interesting question. If you look at sales processes and stuff, traditional, we really build a sales process based on when the salesperson first engages with the prospect. We tend to leave everything that comes before it is like over in marketing automation or whatever, and it doesn't come into the actual pipeline until there's that engagement. But it does kind of strike me as, okay, if there's a lot of this sales process taking place, maybe we have to take a new look at our sales process and say, well, is something really in stage one because it's now being turned over to a salesperson, or is it in fact much further? Is it actually a really stage 3 because there's all of this engagement that has happened before, and like you said about your engagement scores earlier. So I think it actually raises a whole set of questions around how we traditionally look at pipelines.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it truly centric to an organization being more contact centric, more customer centric, and understanding where people are. And there's always going to be a sales pipeline, right? And there's always going to be sort of a funnel for marketing generated leads of where are they, or there's going to be campaign funnels per se. But Lifecycle gives you that framework to where it's a little simpler to understand that, you know, hey, as a business, we have 5 stages. Here's the criteria that's going to move people through there. And then we're going to have different strategies and campaigns and tactics and content and resources for each one of these stages. You know, it's fascinating for us that when we implement our clients, and our software actually has this lifecycle map. And so think of this map and think of little scatter chart dots. Those are individual people or companies, different databases. That's coming from CRM. It's coming from POS or ERP or financial systems. It's coming from product utilization components. And they have a complete view that says this is where all your customers are. We do as an organization to move these people forward. Who's in here, right? And it could be, well, they actually have a certain demographic, and you don't really have a product that matches that demographic. So you need to innovate and create a product that's going to be of value to them. Maybe your messaging is not geared towards them at all. So maybe it's a shift in the way that you message towards them. Or maybe these people are in a certain country, or they're in a certain region, you don't have a sales rep in that region, right? You don't have account managers in that region. You don't have partners in that region. So looking at that allows you to say, okay, we can see what people are getting stuck. We do or don't have the right resources effectively. So let's spend our time trying to focus on this right audience based on this stage. And if we move a certain percentage out and we do it quick enough, we know this is going to have a very positive impact on our revenue.
One other thing. Another question. Obviously, a pipeliner. We're a CRM company, and one of the issues that a lot of people have had in the past with CRM, especially salespeople. I mean, it's a real struggle to get some of them to enter the data, and we can have a discussion another time on whether that's part of that blame has been the way other CRMs have been constructed in the past. But anyway, I mean, there has always been this ongoing struggle. So can customer lifecycle marketing, can that provide a greater incentive for salespeople to really use their CRM and put the data in and leverage the data better?
Oh, absolutely. And and Pipeliner obviously does a really good job of automatically pulling in data from Google Calendar, and it pulls in your meetings automatically, and it pulls in your feeds from your email. So it automatically pulls that data in there. So it's their email address, otherwise the information won't match up. So getting that data in there is critical, and it's important. We talk to a lot of sales organizations, and they say this: hey, we're rolling out a new CRM. Half my sales team is going to be excited about it, the other half won't. How do we encourage this? And I say, just tell the salespeople that aren't doing it they don't have to. You don't have to put the data in there. Now, for the folks that do, here's the benefit that they're going to get out of it. We're going to do all these campaigns, we're going to have these resources, we're going to have this content, we're going to do things on behalf of the salespeople, but you don't have to do it, John. You've got it already figured out. You've got a better way. You've been doing it for years your way, and you think it's better. But for the folks that want to take advantage of it, we're going to offer this. So I'm not going to force you to do it. And then pretty soon you'll start seeing these other reps. They're getting a lot more visibility. The people are interacting. They're responding. They're closing more deals. And then the tough guy that didn't want to put the stuff in the CRM is like saying, okay, hang on. Perhaps I do need to put my data in here, and I need to help the marketing team have good information so they can do better targeting, better segmentation, and communicate with more individuals.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's nothing that incents a salesperson more than seeing another salesperson being successful doing something.
Right.
So, I mean, it's one of the most powerful ways of getting them to do anything. But so as we're coming towards the end of this session, I think we have about 10 minutes or so left. Can you talk about what are some of the challenges that you face in getting sales, to understand or adopt a customer life cycle marketing product? I mean, I know part of it is education, but what are some of the other challenges that you come up against, and how do you overcome those?
Well, typically sales is pretty excited about it, right? So sales normally is like, okay, so basically you're telling me I'm going to have clear visibility on all the marketing engagement with my prospects and my customers. So they are normally very excited about it. So there's normally not a whole lot of roadblocks with the sales team. They get the value. They're like, hey, I need better insight. I need more information. I want to be more efficient and effective. I want to win, right? And I see that this information is going to help me do it. So there's not normally a whole lot of roadblocks with the sales team that's out there. Value. You need to have data, and you need to have good data, and the better data you have and the more of it, the more the actual benefits that you could receive from it. So data typically is a stumbling block or a challenge that companies face, and sometimes they get stuck in this, well, I'm going to wait until my data is good before I do something. And that never happens, right? Because your data is never good. It's always changing. And, it's something like I saw this stat where 30% of the people change jobs. You have another 30% that change roles within a company. So you have like 66% or 65% always changing and evolving. But that whole data discussion typically could be a roadblock. The other thing to take advantage of this omnipresent, multi-channel more content, you've got to be producing more content, right? And you've got to have more information out there. But you can start small and you can move into it. Just don't think that you have to boil the ocean out of the gate. So normally, this great customer experience company, but it can start with things that you're already doing. Most companies are already doing email marketing. Most companies already have a website. Most companies have a sales team. Most companies are doing social media. But those things typically are done in isolation, right? And they're in silos. So just getting that data into one spot is a huge win. And most people don't, think I can't do that. So I'd say start small, and then gradually try to improve and move over time.
So what are some of the you just mentioned, like you've mentioned content a lot, and content marketing. So what are some of the what is some of the advice you would give to people? Because I mean, we're at a I feel we're at a point where people are producing so much content, and often, it's not that well targeted. It seems to be content for content's sake. So, what is some of the advice you would give to people how to really stand out with their content and make their content marketing strategy really work, as opposed to just being a spray and pray kind of approach?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about content, there's the whole owned, there's the earned, and there's the paid content that you have. And I think you have to work all three of those. You've got to be everywhere with what you're doing, right? The real value is, I think, that whole owned piece. So companies that are able to create their own communities, people will come to them and they will digest their native content that they're producing, just like what you're doing here, John, with this is content, it's information, it's educational. You guys own this, right? And so I think that's where companies have to go. They have to think through, how can we become more thought leaders, be a trusted resource where people want to go find information, not just by products, but we want to align ourselves with people that are helping us strategically think through better ways of using their product and service. So you're still going to keep doing the paid. You still want to try to tap into other audiences that are out there from an earned standpoint and getting the respect, maybe through bylines or other bigger communities that will point back to you. But when they come back, you've got to have the content there on your site that's going to give you credibility and trust to begin with.
Yeah, and I mean, and then that flows over into, we talked about salespeople and their branding, and them actually producing content or whatever. One of the big pushbacks you'll always get is, I'm a salesperson, I can't write, I don't know how to produce content, and I've got all this other stuff to do. What advice do you offer people in terms of how to help their salespeople with building their brands?
That's a great question. I think that and they start building that brand, and they start getting friends and followers and people interacting with them on social media, and then they're closing business. And then the other sales team members say, well, hang on, hey, my cold calls and my cold emails just aren't working, but this person here is getting a lot of response, and they're way to do that is the salespeople that take the lead and they start building that brand. Initially you can just start curating content and as a salesperson saying, hey, here's a good article, hey, I like this, and you can start there. You don't have to create stuff, but you can just start being seen and being part of the conversation, whether that's on different groups or forums, maybe it's LinkedIn groups or it's other forums that are out there, and the salesperson is just interacting with someone else's content. That's where you would start. But eventually they would start writing some of their own content and best practices and thoughts to really positioning themselves as a thought leader that's out there, independently of sharing someone else's content.
And then on the subject of customer lifecycle marketing, so if somebody's tuned in today and maybe they had heard about it, but maybe had only had a superficial understanding of it, and now they're intrigued by the concept and the notion, how would you advise somebody to get started with customer lifecycle marketing?
Well, I mean, I would start with trying to map out and identify what are my life cycle stages for my business, right? What is that definitive gate criteria that's going to move someone from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 to stage 4? And depending on what their business is, that criteria B2B world, you've got prospects and customers, and you don't move until you sign a contract, right? And so the gate criteria is you sign a contract, right? But what are the other that would determine people move between this? And on the customer side, what is that? Is that based on buying more products, so more SKUs or maybe more categories as a business? Is it based on frequency of purchasing? Is it based on consumption? Right? So maybe you're a company that wants to have people consume more stuff, and you're able to track that on the back end. So first step is identify your stages and some gate criteria that might be there. And if you're able to map your database and sort of see where people are, I think you'll see some insights, and it will potentially give you an idea. John, really understand who are our best customers. Do we really know who that is? And I would look at it from a profitability standpoint, and I would take those two elements, and based on that, I would it's going to be my 80-20, right? So here's the companies that buy a lot from me, and they use my service a lot, and they're going to be in my far right stage of my life cycle. And then I would take whatever those attributes are. So that's typically demographic and firmographic information. So it's size of business, it's geography, it's years in business, it's industry codes, and I apply those weights and values across my entire life cycle and say, where is everybody as they compare to my fit? Maybe like my ideal customers. So you just spend a lot of money driving a lot of leads. Marketing's giving themselves high fives because they're doing a good job with a bunch of activity, but they're bringing in won't convert, or if they do, they won't be as profitable as they should be. So I would focus on that profile piece, and then I would ask, how are we engaging with people? How do they engage with our brand, and are we able to capture that information in an easy way? So whether that's the look for, are we able to track engagement effectively, and where do we start with that, right? And engagement components that are sort of the main components of lifecycle marketing.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic advice, and I love the way, I love the way that it all comes back again to something as simple and fundamental as understanding your customers, understanding your current customers, understanding who your most profitable customers are, understanding their behaviors, their buying process, all of that. These are things that any company can do, because you can just, you can call up your customer and you can have a conversation with them and really get to understand them better. You can look inside and you can crunch your numbers and see who the most profitable are. You can get market sizing information. I mean, these are not difficult things to do, right, Troy?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, all the data is there. It's just how do I pull it together in a framework that's simple to understand and it's simple to administer.
Well, thank you. We're bumping up against the top of the hour. I think this has been a really interesting session. I mean, I've certainly learned a lot myself, got deeper insight into customer lifecycle marketing. Troy, do you want to just give out the URL of your company, of Right On Interactive, if people are interested in getting in contact with you?
You got it. Yep, it's Right On Interactive, RIGHTON Interactive.com. And then if they want to connect, they can connect with at TROYBURK. So those would be two ways they could reach out and learn more about our company.
Right. Well, thanks again for today. Martha, do you have any closing comments? Anything on the Twitter sphere that you wanted to share?
Yes, maybe one short comment from Craig. He wrote, I wish more sales and marketing teams would measure effectiveness of CLM using assists like they do in basketball. So I think this is a great conclusion. Yeah,
excellent.
But that's also, I think, thank you, Troy. Thank you also, John, for co-hosting today. And yeah, thanks all on Twitter for joining us. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.